Welcome to I Read It, where we feature a new cool story every day. Subscribe to the channel and tap the notifications bell for new content. In today's story, Mags Not Maggie tells us how she fricked up by falling for a starving musician's absurdly excellent strategy for getting laid. I met a guy through mutual friends at an after-work meetup, and after some chatting, he came through with that old chestnut we should go out sometime. Seemed like a good idea at the time, so I agreed. We thumbed our respective numbers into each other's mobile phones. And when he called a couple of days later, we arranged to meet at a bar/restaurant for a couple of drinks and then dinner. When I got to the bar, I looked around for him and was a little surprised to see that he was sitting at the piano. At first, I thought it was one of those places where they let anyone with moderate talent have a go, but it was a rather upscale restaurant, so it didn't seem likely. I walked over and said hello. He finished playing the piece and then sheepishly admitted that he was actually working there. That was a little weird, but I went with it. The plan was, he said, for us to hang out and have a few drinks while he played. And then when his set was up, we could go have dinner, because he really didn't have a lot of money, but he wanted to take me someplace nice, and anyway he got a free meal during his break from his gig. I almost decided to bail right then and there. But he was a pretty good pianist, and he had a decent voice. I shrugged, mentally, and figured I would stay and listen for a polite length of time and then make some lame excuse. I sat on a chair next to the piano and nursed a couple of Cuba Libres while he played. At some point, said it's kind of loud in here. Admittedly true, the bar was getting pretty crowded. Then he scooted over and patted the piano bench. I scrunched on next to him so we could hear each other over the sound of the piano and the people talking. Little did I know that this was the first step in his dastardly plan. Well, I sort of knew. I mean, it was an obvious ploy to get me to sit closer. Newsflash, guys, you're usually not as subtle as you think you are. But I thought that was all it was, and I was so wrong. A few songs later, he just stopped and told me, ever since you said you'd go out with me, I've had this tune in my head. It's like something beamed it into me, and I can't stop thinking about it. And then he played a few notes. Then he tried out a few chords. Then a few more notes and chords. Changed keys. Fiddled with the time signature. Diddled around with high keys. Improvised a bit. Piano playing intensifies. Pretty soon, this vague melody starts turning into an actual song. With a chord progression, notes, fills, and damn, it's pretty darn good. I'm like, digging, being right there as the creative process happens. He keeps looking at me and changing things, and every time he does it gets a tiny bit better, and finally, it's almost perfect. Wow, he says. It's like it just came to me. Like the music was there sitting right next to me or something. I blush. Perhaps heave a bosom or two. And then the coup de grace, I think I'll call it Maggie's song, he says. And that, my friends, closed the deal. I decided that if he wanted to delve into the treasures of the Sierra Maggies, he would not need no stinking badges. And then, as if by magic, his friend the bartender, who I was introduced to earlier, comes over and tells us that if we want to have dinner, he could clear us a table. We had some nice conversation, finished dinner. He at least paid for the whole thing. I would have gladly gone halfsies even though his meal was on the house, and then he went back to his gig for another hour or so. I should have figured it out right then, because at one point he announced to the bar that he was going to play an original song inspired by the beautiful girl sitting next to me. And then he played the song straight through, no errors or hesitation, no pauses to tweak this or that. But I was so starstruck at hearing Maggie's song's public debut and a little embarrassed by the attention, that I completely missed the obvious. We made it to his apartment, barely, I admit, to some fairly racy back of the cab mucking. I was only mildly disconcerted by 1, his 3 roommates, 2, the fact that his room's furnishings consisted of an end table next to a mattress on the floor, and 3, the piles of dirty/dirtier/dirtiest laundry lining the walls. We did the deed. Vigorously, and to the tune of Maggie's song. No, really, he hummed the, admittedly catchy, melody in time with stuff, which probably was the most impressive feat of the evening. Eventually, festivities concluded, and I attended to the wrap-up of what was my first, and is still my only, one-night stand. Cab home in the wee hours wearing the previous evening's clothing and a bit of exhaustion the next day. Not as bad as I'd imagined it to be, actually. The frick-up, so, a bit of a tumble with a cute guy who I'd somehow inspired to write a beautiful song that I still had going through my head 3 days later. And all it cost me was the price of a couple of pre-dinner drinks and some cab fare home. How is that a FU? Well, here's how. 2 days later, I notice a couple of red welts on my calves and lower back. They itch like frick. I figure I just got bitten by mosquitoes or something and let it go. Then more welts. They heal. But then 2 weeks later I get more just like them. I think maybe I have hives, so I make a same-day app with my doc, expecting to be told to get some cortisone and not eat so much dairy. But he takes a look and says, "Have you ever noticed little black dots anywhere in your floor or carpet?" And I'm like, "Black dots?" He said he couldn't be sure, but based on my description of the timing he suspected. You guessed it, bed bugs. And then he told me to buy some OTC Benadryl and cortisone cream and said I should try to figure out what kind of insect it might be and not get bitten by it so much. No word on the dairy. Sure enough, as soon as I got home and started looking for it, I found evidence of the little frickers. Thankfully, I caught it early. I now know more than I ever wanted to about the subject. Apparently, it takes a while for an infestation to catch on, so I was lucky that I found it early. I called an exterminator, followed their instructions to the letter, and was able to prevent a biblical plague. One of the things I had to do, per exterminator instruction, was contact the owners of any place I thought I might have originally picked up the bugs. Which meant I would have to get in touch with Mr. Pianist, who had been maintaining radio silence since he wrote and debuted Maggie's song and stopped its muse all in one evening. He made the usual excuses about not calling. It had been 2 weeks, so I was well over my initial disappointment, and admitted that yeah, maybe, he might have some bedbugs, but they were totally not a problem. I was like, whatever, and told him he should call an exterminator and do something about it. And that was the last I heard of the guy. Except that at some point later, I was telling this story to one of my girlfriends, and I got to the point where I was at the bar and he was playing piano. And then she says, "And let me guess, he wrote a song right there and named it after you." Turns out, Maggie's song is also Grace's song. And Jennifer's song. And Jody's song. Or whoever's song who he happens to be trying to screw that night. Apparently he's got this down to a science. That same song goes from random twinklings on the keyboard to a full arrangement in a single evening every time. My brief moment in the spotlight was shared with a number of other unsuspecting muses, at least some of whom probably went on to an evening of pleasure and parasites. And as much as, in retrospect, it was painfully obvious, that didn't make it any less painful. I felt so stupid. Years later, I would watch How I Met Your Mother and realize I'd once been had by something that could have been right out of the Barney Stinson playbook. What do you think about this story? Let me know in the comments section. Help us grow so more people will join us. Thank you for watching this video, and we will see you in the next one. Bye.